Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the dishonest and underhanded attempt by House Democrats and also by Schumer colluding together to try to undermine the Senate rules. Now keep in mind, this is basically Schumer being Nancy Pelosi's little pissy lapdog, because what it argues is that senators should have less power. Think of it, when do you think that members of government argue that they should have actually less latitude? Because that's what this is, because it's an attempt to bypass the filibuster. What's happening right now is that the Senate is going to propose its voting rights bill, which is really an attempt to federalize and undermine election integrity. It's to block the states, possibly unconstitutionally, by the way, from doing voter ID, etc. Basically, you'll have a fortification, a hem, in all 50 states if this passes, which means that, the idea of having an election that's proper at that point going forward into the future, not really going to happen. It would basically be another nail in the coffin of the Republic, and it would devolve us closer to a one-party, or rather one ideology system, in which you'll have Republicans, they might even have a president or something, but it'll be a controlled op like a Bush Republican. It's not going to be a populist. It's not going to be someone that actually gives tax relief to the lower classes, actually deregulates, actually avoids going into wars that are going to cost us trillions of dollars. You'll get a Bush Republican. And on the other side, you'll get Clinton Democrats. You won't even get a leftoid. By the way, why the fuck would the far left be stupid enough to vote for this? Oh, that's right, it's because they're far leftists. They're even more stupid than the neoliberals. But this is an attempt to undermine election integrity. It's being cast as a voting rights bill, but keep this in mind. Majority of the public, a supermajority across literally every demographic, supports voter ID. Close to that supports voter ID for absentee. And there's not a huge amount of support for universal mail-in anyway, which makes sense since if you look at the developed world, there aren't a lot of countries with universal mail-in voting. Some of them ban it outright, except for people who are soldiers or diplomats. They're currently overseas. That's a sane and civilized system because it forms election integrity. As long as you make sure that the people counting the ballots are actually not underhanded too. It makes it a hell of a lot harder to screw with elections. The 10th Amendment, giving states broad power, also insinuates that the states largely have the right to monitor their own elections. If this bill does pass, and I'll get into how likely that is, it will probably be legally embattled, and thankfully with the composition of SCOTUS as it is, could eventually get shot down. But unless SCOTUS fast-tracks it, like, we might get an OSHA mandate decision today. We're not sure which decision they'll deliver. It probably wouldn't be before midterms. It'd be in the next term for the SCOTUS. That would be a problem too, because then the midterms, you wouldn't have a wave of populists. You'll have plenty of Republicans. The Republicans will probably take the House, but it'll be all neocons. The Democrats that win will be neoliberals. They might even force the leftoids aside. Again, I hope that they understand what they're actually voting for and look through the language of the bill. Most of these people are lazy fucking alcoholics and they can't be bothered. Keep in mind, before I go into this, link down below, links rather, in a pinned comment. If you're watching this video on YouTube, keep in mind I make exclusive content every day on those platforms that doesn't go on YouTube, because YouTube, there's a lot of topics that are verboten now. Thankfully, Joe Manchin exists. Let me explain the basic procedure of this attempt. They know that they don't have the votes in the Senate to get around a filibuster. They can't even hold a final vote because they can't establish closure. But they can if they bounce it to the House considers it, debates it, they bounce it back, and so forth. If there are two different versions of the same bill, one in the House, one in the Senate, and they bounce back and forth, they have to establish reconciliation. This is a workaround for the Senate rules to try to bypass and allow a simple majority to hold a vote. Thankfully, there are several things, I think, standing in the way of this attempted election takeover. The first is Joe Manchin. He represents West Virginia. This would essentially, at least temporarily, nullify his own power by giving the VP the nod and allowing him to potentially be sidelined as long as they wine and dine Murkowski, who has shown a willingness to vote for at least one of the two portions of this bill. If I'm Manchin, I don't want to give up the power. My West Virginian extremely red constituents, I don't think are on board with the idea of abolishing voter ID laws. I'd be voting against my own self-interest. Again, The second is potentially SCOTUS, but the third stumbling block is it's not entirely clear that this allows them to hold a final vote without a filibuster. It appears they still need the full majority. If they do need 60 votes to pass it, they won't achieve it. You'll have Romney vote for it. You'll have Murkowski vote for it. I'm not thinking of any other Republicans in the Senate that I think would defect to vote for it. And then again, by and large, Manchin might defect anyway. You might have a Dem vote or two against it. Sinema, of course, wouldn't benefit from this either. So thankfully, I mean, the concept itself is hazarded, but it's dangerous, and it should give people concern. This is, again, why you need to get rid of the neocon dross, the Dan Crenshaws and Liz Cheneys of the Republican Party, scoot them aside and get principled populists in there. This is why the Democrats need to be massively punished during the midterms. They shouldn't have a goddamn House seat left. The best possible scenario is that this lawless administration and its lackeys in the Senate, which are functioning more like a national party and therefore not doing their job, which senators are meant to represent the people of a particular state, not a party platform, they need to be punished and reminded of their actual role as senators. Biden should not even be in office. He's a vegetable who's not fit to serve. The VP is an absentee and not doing her job as well. What more need be said? This particular dishonest and underhanded reconciliation methodology typically is used quite sparingly for things that are very, very important. But the public doesn't judge this as important. Only people who are far left judge this to be important, and a handful of Dem partisans. It's a small minority of the U.S. public. The majority supports voter ID laws. And I think that if they fail, and again, if I look at the scales on it, I think the likelihood of failure is higher. I think that side of the scale is heavier. If they fail, then it probably backfires on the Democrats. Well, you can't do anything right. You had a Democrat vote against it. We don't understand why we don't have our federalized elections here. But I think that this time, sometimes these moves are nothing more than show. It's basically they want the Republicans to go on record so that they can lambaste them and pretend that they're opposed to voters' rights or something. This time, though, I think they do mean business because they're looking forward to the midterms and they're saying, well, a lot of Republicans are being forced out, the incumbents, by populists. The populist libertarian side of the Republican Party is younger, it's more activistic, it's growing. So that's one threat. On the other side, they're threatened by leftoids that diverge from the mainline neo-lib party with its pro-war, pro-corporate tax cut system. These are the Clintons, these are the Schumers of the party that control the purse strings. I think they'll actually go ahead with it. What they're afraid of is in 2024, the Republicans will be usurped by populism. More leftoids will get elected in the Democratic Party at state and federal level. And then in 2024, if it's not Trump, it'll be someone else who's populistic and running against a far leftoid, because Biden clearly at this point is on his last leg mentally. They're worried about another 2016-style election in which you could end up with a chief executive with latitude who's got independence, who's not part of that old school club, number one. And number two, unlike in 2016, actually has control in the House and Senate. They're worried that their toys will be broken, their globalistic toys. And it's beginning to look more and more like a Weimar situation. Remember, the Nazis and the communists that were vying for power in Weimar Germany never gained more than a foothold, never became major players until the economy had problems. What do we fucking have right now? We're on the goddamn precipice. The economy is already a step away from official stagflation, by the official definition. We've got multiple bubbles ready to burst. We've got a huge amount of social alienation. Crime is rising for a reason. And so you have the upswelling of far left and far right groups. The leftoids are violent. The far right is violent. You also have an attempt to save the country with populism, which is not extreme at all. It's a reform movement that's based on effectively like a Dwight Eisenhower mentality, civic awareness. We're tired of having onerous taxes, and we're not all in on offshoring literally everything in the United States to China. That's not an extreme platform. It's the platform that every politician at least paid lip service through the entirety of the atomic era. up until second term Ronald Reagan, when it gets perverted into the neocons that we know today, because he was at that point demented like Biden is and simply a puppet. The attempt to force this through, though, also smacks of failure. It's essentially an admission, despite the fact that we've branded this to the public as we're going to protect voters' rights, we can't ensure that it's actually capable of getting more than a very, very simple majority of votes in the Senate, to the point where we would need the Vice President of the United States, not an elected senator, to cast the tie-breaking vote. Even then, it might not get past Manchin, even if they had the simple majority vote. So they might fail completely, and I hope that they do. Everyone in West Virginia especially has an outsized role. You need to put pressure on Joe Manchin. Arizonans need to do that to Sinema. And Republicans in wherever she's from, Alaska, I think, need to pressure Murkowski to hold the line as well to block this from happening. To be clear again, if this does pass, and it's not injuncted immediately by the court system, it would effectively end the concept of a republic in the United States, devolving the Senate into a direct democratic apparatus. Well, the problem is that if you have one extra House member, one extra senator, or a tie, as we have now, and a president of the same party, you have a one-party system. All you have to do is bribe people to keep them in line. That's the other part of it. When you've got that slim majority style system, you end up with blackmail and bribery being far more rife, as the executive especially tries to levy that support. Well, yeah, okay, we can insert, something into the bill to give your state $1 billion, but you have to vote for it first to get the $1 billion. It's as simple as that. It's corruption and dysfunction. We need massive reform. That's about all. Peace out.